Hi everyone, Stepan here. In this video I'm going to show you 9 deadly traps in the London system which you can use to win games straight out of the opening. I've won my first London system game using one of these traps. Now most of them, if not all of them, are very difficult to spot and Grandmasters have fallen for them. So they're not going to be easy for your opponents to see. If you know them, if you know the patterns, your opponents are very likely to fall for them. Let's just get straight into it. The first series of traps I would like to show you begins in the main line of the London, where black plays the setup with d5 and e6. So from this position, this is what black is most commonly going to be playing. Knight g2 f3, bishop d6, bishop g3, very normal. If you don't know this position, you may want to watch my series on the theory in the London first and then get back into this. If you already know the theory, then you know everything about this. Castles, bishop to d3. And here there are several ways for black to play. By far the most common is to play pawn to b6. This is just the best move. And here you start your trap setting with pawn to e4. This is a very aggressive move. It's not the only move. White could play several different ways, and black doesn't have to take the pawn, and the game could still steer in many directions, but most people are going to take. I should mention that the best move for black is to play bishop to e7, which seems counterintuitive, allowing e5 and then knight h5, and the theory goes on from here. Again, you can find the theory in the theory playlist. But after e4, once black takes, we take with the knight, they take, and we take. Now the knight is attacked, fine, it has to be defended. Bishop to b7. And here is the starting point of our trap. Here are the patterns we have to notice. The bishop is attacked, the h7 pawn is attacked, the bishop on d6 can be attacked twice. So once we combine all of these factors, we need to increase the pressure on d6, increase the pressure on the diagonal on the c6 knight and on the b7 bishop, and eventually try to mate black on h7. How can we do all of that? Well, we start with dc5. Of course, if b takes c5, then we simply win the bishop. So the bishop has to take. Okay, queen to a4. We are putting double pressure on the knight. Now, let's start with trap number 1. There are two ways to defend this knight. Moving the knight to a5 is not a good move. This is just, I don't think anybody would play this. It's simply counterintuitive. If they play this, then you're pretty much fine. The first trap is defending the knight with the queen. Okay, queen c7 is impossible, of course, because of the bishop on g3. If they play queen to c8, you win on the spot. And now, again, we have to factor in all the tactical patterns in the position. We mentioned the key one already, and that's the h7 square, and we simply go for the Greek gift. Now, why is queen c8 a bad move? It undefended the h4 square, and our queen, which is putting double pressure on c6 and on h4, can simply win the game. We sacrifice the bishop, bishop h7. If the king doesn't take, if king h8, then we simply go queen to h4, and we win with a mate in 2. So the bishop has to be taken. King takes bishop, now queen h4 check, king to g8, and knight to g5, and from here on the position is winning. I should mention that if king to g6, then we simply chase the king back, and again we reach the same position. Doesn't matter. He has to move the rook. We take on f7, we win the game. Let's just have a look at how that would go. So knight to g5, the rook moves to d8, for example. Queen h7, king f8, queen h8, king e7. We take on g7, attacking f7. The only defense is rook f8. Now we simply castle queenside. Next moves knight e4, rook e1, and the position is overwhelming. So after queen a4, the first trap, if they fall for it, you win straight away. If they don't fall for it, if they play the best move, rook to c8, we now come to the second trap. Okay, we have a tempo move available. Whenever you have tempo moves in the opening, they are usually the best moves on the board. So rook to d1 attacks the queen. Now there are two ways for black to lose this position immediately. There is only one move. The only move black could play is queen to e7. Why is queen e7 the only move? Well, the queen will not be a tempo gainer for white's bishop on h4, and it's still defending the h4 square. Okay, that's very important. After queen e7, white should be slightly better. Bishop h7 doesn't work now, of course, because if we take and king takes, then queen h4, simply queen h4. So queen e7 is what should be played. Let's have a look at two mistakes. Queen e8 is the obvious mistake, which, again, this is the second trap. You have to know if they play queen e8, the same pattern, bishop takes h7, king takes h7. Now it's even worse because the rook cannot move and you simply win. That there is just nothing he can do. For example, like this. And this is going to be mate next move, whatever black does. Okay, a bit more subtle now. And this is something I've actually had in a training game, and I didn't win this position, which is very bad. Okay, this, I believe most players would actually play, and this is what my 2200 rated opponent played in a trading game. He played queen f6. Now, it's not clear why queen f6 is a bad move. It seems that the queen can be trapped, but it's not really true. That's not really true. Because it always has h6 and h5 and e5 in some positions. But again, we need to see why queen f6 loses. We need to understand the patterns in the position, and then we'll be able to play this correctly. The correct move here is simply castles. And believe it or not, there is no good move for black. Whatever black does, black loses the game immediately. There are a couple of threats. Okay, the first threat, if black does nothing, let's say black plays h6 to prevent bishop h4 and to continue with g5. Then we go b4, the bishop is attacked, the bishop only has one square, bishop to e7, and now b5. Okay, again, we have just won the position and the game is over. Because, well, what can he do? If the knight moves away, for example, if knight to a5 is played, then simply bishop takes b7, knight takes b7, bishop e5, and where can the queen go? If queen to g6, then queen takes a7, and again, where can the knight go? What can he do? The knight is trapped. If here, then we take the bishop, so the knight has to be given away. So knight a5 is no good. What else can black try? If knight to b8 is played, we can simply take the bishop. There are no good options. Okay, let's have a look at other attempts by black. After queen f6 and castles, h6 doesn't work because of b4, b5. Let's say black tries a6 to prevent b5. Now we simply continue b4. The bishop drops back to e7, and we go bishop h4. Okay, well, why are we winning this position? The queen has to move away. Let's say queen to f4. Okay, b5 attacks the knight. The knight has to move. If the knight moves, we play bishop h7, and then the queen is lost. Okay, let's come back to this position. Okay, after bishop h4, what else can he try? Let's say queen to h6 is played. Well, simply bishop takes e7, and here, and that's it. Nothing else. Okay, coming back to this position, what else can black try? If they try rook f to d8, for example, trying to trade rooks, well, we simply play bishop to h4. And again, that's about it, because that's about it. So queen f6, simply castle. Simply castle, there are no good moves here. Black loses this position. Okay, now let's have a look at a trap. This is probably one of my favorites. This is a trap that the second best Croatian player, or the third best maybe, fell for against Magnus Carlsen. Okay, so let's get into the opening. Again, d4, d5, bishop f4, knight f6, e3, c5, c3, knight c6, knight d2, e6, knight gf3, bishop d6, bishop g3, castles. We saw this position already. And in the previous traps, we went for the main line with bishop to d3. In this game, or in this trap, we play bishop to b5. What's the idea behind bishop to b5? Well, the London system is about controlling the e5 square, and whoever gets to control it most usually has a better position. Therefore, this knight should not be allowed to be traded for the bishop. So in case, for example, a6 is played, takes, and queen a4, and white is extremely happy in this position. For example, bishop to g3, g3, queen b6. This is sort of a Nimzo-Indian type weakness where white has tremendous control over e5. The other knight will be able to jump in there as well, and white should be better. Therefore, after bishop to b5, knight e7 is the best move and the main move. Okay, and now we simply bring the bishop to d3. So what we've done, instead of playing bishop to d3 straight away, we chased the knight away. Okay, here Bosiocic, the Croatian player who faced Magnus Carlsen, played b6, and b6 is seemingly the best move, and it makes perfect sense if you want to go for the normal setup that you've seen in the previous trap, but it's not really that good. What black should do is continue queen c7, and then if white does nothing, for example queen to e2, rook to d8, white castles, you can safely bring this knight back and just try and increase your control over the e5 square, and this should be fine for black. If black plays b6, then again, we know the pattern, we go e4. Now, it's even worse for black, because there's no knight on c6, so tactically, there are going to be more patterns black could fall for. So we go e4, again, d4, knight e4, knight e4, bishop e4. And here, Bosiocic lost the game in one move. He is a 2600 grandmaster, extremely strong, one of the strongest Croatian players, and he just lost the game here. This is move 12. The saving move is knight to d5, and black should be okay. White continues dc5, bishop c5, maybe queen to c2, h6. Should be more pleasant for white because h6 has weakened the position, but nothing major. Black should be okay. The most tempting move, if your rook is attacked, is to move the rook. So rook to b8 was played. Now the game is over. Why is the game over? Well, let's have a look. We play dc5, same pattern, we saw it already, the bishop is attacked twice. The problem is here that if bishop takes c5, as in the previous position, we can simply grab the rook. So that's not possible here. So the bishop has to take on g3. H takes on g3. Now, we would like to grab our pawn back, but again, that's impossible because a bishop takes h7. If, for example, pawn takes, well, let's say queen takes queen first and rook takes, and let's say something like bishop to b7. It doesn't matter. Anything that doesn't do something about h7. Then we have bishop h7, king h8, and simply rook d7. And next move we are playing bishop e4 and winning the bishop. Or if the knight doesn't move, we just win the knight and the game is over. So after hg3, black has to play f5. Has to save himself from this. And now here's the great part. This is the most beautiful part of this trap. We go queen d8, rook d8, and c6. And the game Carlsen Bosiocic finished soon afterwards. The point is, if you play fe4, then I go c7, and if bishop b7, I just don't give up my knight. I go knight g5 and I win the game. So again, let's go back. After bishop to d3, after this bishop b5, knight d7, bishop to d3 idea, if black goes b6, just continue e4. Everything is going to be traded off. And now rook b8, and the game is over. So a 2600 player fell for this. Your opponents may fall for it too. Okay, moving forward, now we are coming to the trap which I used to win my first London system game. This is the most famous one. We don't play bishop b5 in this one, we play bishop to d3 straight away. And this trap doesn't start after b6, it starts after queen e7. Queen e7 is really not a good move if you know this trap. If you do know it, then it doesn't make any sense. If you don't know the trap, well, you want to play e5. However, white can continue knight e5 here. And black is still fine after probably bishop e5 or queen to c7, something normal. But If they play the visually most appealing move, knight to d7, trying to challenge e5 and play f6, then white can either draw or win, depending on what black does on his next move. So again, we are going to be using the tactical pattern of the Greek gift. We are going to try to win on h7 with queen h4, or queen h5. So we take the knight first. Why? This is a deflection. We actually want all of the pieces to move away, and we want to take on c5, drag the black queen to c5, and then use the fact that it's on c5 to play knight e4 with tempo, trying to get into g5 and mate on h7. This may sound complicated, but let's see what happens. So most players are going to develop their piece. So bishop takes d7. And now let's start dragging the queen to c5, bishop d6, queen d6, dc. Now if black doesn't take, then the queen is not on c5, the trap doesn't work. But then you're up a pawn. If they do take, Greek gift sacrifice, game over. And I actually had this in my first London system game. Bishop h7, king h7, queen h5 check, king g8, and here's the point, knight e4. Threatening knight g5, winning the game and attacking the queen. So he doesn't have time to play something like rook d8 because we grabbed the queen. My opponent in the game played g6, which loses because I get my piece back. So takes, takes, takes. And in the end, white is 2 pawns up. In most games, black played queen to c4. After queen to c4, we go knight g5. He has to move the rook, otherwise it's mate. Queen takes, king h8, queen h5, and simply rook to d1. And we are preparing a rook lift and winning the game. Or if queen to b5 is played instead of queen to c4, same thing. It's just that we don't have to play rook to d1. We can castle queenside because our pawn on a2 is not attacked by the queen on c4. So this trap is the most famous one, and it's just it wins the game on the spot. It was a beautiful feeling to play it, I have to say. Okay, let's move on. The next position I would like to show you works with playing knight to f3 instead of knight to d2 in this position, which again is a tricky subtlety you may want to employ in your games against more experienced players, because then it's likely they will fall for it. This is a subtlety that seems like an inaccuracy, but it actually sets up a trap. So usually we want to start with knight d2 to make sure we don't allow bishop to g4, pinning our knight. But let's start with knight to f3. Okay, bishop to g4, fine. We continue knight b to d2 here, and now pawn to e6. And here we are not going to be playing bishop to d3, we are going to play bishop to b5. Okay, and this trap is all about the pressure on this diagonal and on the d7 square and on the black king. So let's see what happens. Black plays a normal developing move, bishop to d6, and that's okay. We go queen to a4. Okay, and in this position, if bishop f4 is played, then we take twice on c6 and we have a winning material advantage. And after queen to a4, if black castles, we simply go bishop c6, bc6, bishop to d6, okay, queen to d6, and knight to e5. Okay, I should mention that taking on c6 here isn't really such a good idea, because then bishop to f4 can be played, and after that your pawn structure is slightly ruined and he gets a lot of activity with rook b8 and queen to b6. So if queen takes c6 here, then bishop f4 and ef4, and c takes d4, and your position should be collapsing fairly quickly. So instead of that, we play bishop d6, they take, we go knight e5. Okay, and we are double attacking this pawn. We are setting a trap. We are also attacking this bishop. So what's the tactical pattern here? The bishop is attacked. If it's taken, the knight is going to get to g4. Again, we have to look at this queen. It's going to be attacking the knight. And we can take on c5, unleashing the attack of the queen on g4, and gaining a tempo on the queen on d6. So, how can black go wrong here? If he tries to defend the pawn, this is the most common mistake, rook f8. Then we win, that is game over. Knight takes, pawn takes, and black resigns. We're a piece up. If black knows what he's doing, then black plays bishop to f5. And this gives up a pawn, but taking the pawn is actually not a good move here. So white should castle here with a pleasant position. If queen c6, or for example knight c6, then knight d7, and this is should be about equal if white castles. If you try to get all fancy with knight a5, then you are even worse. And this is just not a good position. So if black plays bishop to f5, then castle, and you still have a small edge. Let's see that again. So bishop b5 is the start of our trap. Bishop d6, and we go queen a4. Castles, bishop c6, bc6. We don't take, we play bishop d6, queen d6, knight e5, setting the trap. So black should play bishop f5. If they defend the pawn with rook c8, you win. That's it. Okay, the next one is a very short and weird trap, which I've actually seen people fall for. And believe it or not, grandmasters have fallen for this, and that seems completely unreal to me. Okay, d4, knight f6, knight f3, e6, bishop f4, c5, e3. Here we start with the knight f3 move order, and black continues knight to c6, which is the most common move. And here, of course, if you want to play the normal London, you play c3. If you want to mix it up, you can play a Jobava type move, knight c3. Okay, knight c3 has a clear threat. Obviously, this just threatens to win the game on the spot. You're threatening knight to b5. So there are several ways to fall for this trap, with most common being pawn to d5, which seems like a fairly natural move. You play knight b5 and black resigns. That again, that's just, it's game over. There is basically nothing black could do here. So instead of that, what black should do is c takes d4. And if we try knight to b5 now, we are actually much worse, because queen a5. And now we lose the game. Okay, let's have a look at the position here. After d5 and knight a5 and queen a5 in this position and c3, and for example king to d7, we can now go dc5. And black, I mean, what can black do? For example, let's say, okay, let's say b6, trying to undermine the structure. We just go knight f to d4, and we consolidate everything. If we come back to this position after knight c3, cd5, knight b5 here, queen a5, we cannot go c3 here because of dc3. Okay, so that's the slight issue. If you go knight c3, then you just lost a pawn. If you play knight c7 check, then you are going to be very sad very quickly after yeah, I mean, what can you do? You have to play b takes c3, and then queen takes c3. So okay, coming back to this position, if you want to play the normal London, here just continue c3 or knight b to d2 on move 5, but you can try knight c3, and people may fall for this. Okay, before I continue, I want to show you one cute trap for black, which I actually used to win against my friend that plays the London all the time. And we only played a training game, so it wasn't anything official, but it was still nice to get this one. And if you don't know it, well, you can learn it in 10 seconds. It might be useful. So this is a trap for black, the only one I'm going to show you. So d4, we respond with d5. If they go bishop f4, we go h5. And this may seem like a bad move. And from out of all the traps I'm going to show you today, this is the only bad move, actually. Because if white doesn't fall for it, then why did you play h5? Well, what's the point? We know that London players that start with bishop f4 on move 2 want to play e3 on move 3. Well, this simply loses a piece. How does it lose a piece? We go e5. And e5, even though it can be taken two different ways, simply traps the bishop because the queen is defending g5. And if d takes e5, we go g5. Either bishop g5 or bishop g3, doesn't matter, we win the bishop. Or in this position, if bishop e5, then we go f6, chase the bishop a bit further back, and then we win the bishop. Now, in my experience, and I've played this in an actual game, it's not trivial to win this even if you're piece up, because your pawn structure doesn't exist on the king side. But yeah, you're a piece up. Okay, the next one I want to show you is actually one of the more subtle ones, I think, and could be very hard for your opponents to spot. Let's have a look at it. We start with d4, knight f6, knight f3, e6, bishop f4, c5. This is all very normal. e3 and pawn to b6. We saw that knight c6 is the main move in the previous one, and then I suggested knight to c3. But if they go b6, which is also fine, we continue knight b to d2. Okay, and here we are going to be playing in a very strange way, very provocative way, which sets up a trap, but isn't bad. So what I'm about to show you isn't bad for white. It's just not the best. But even if black knows exactly what you're trying to do, he's still going to be slightly worse. Okay, black continues bishop to b7, which is the logical continuation to b6. And in this position, c3 is the main move. You can also go bishop d3. You can go h3, but I would suggest knight to c4. Okay, knight c4 is a tricky move because it seemingly threatens knight to d6. It's not threatening knight to d6. That's not the point. The trap is the point. If you play knight d6, you lose, and I'm going to show you why. So you have to really learn this one. What black should do here is he should play c takes d4, crashing through your center, and black is fine here. Slightly worse. And white has to continue e4, after which b5 for black, and the knight is chased away to e3. And black simply continues bishop to e7, playing a normal Sicilian type position. One small difference that the pawn is not on b6 but on b5, but it's going to be a normal sort of hedgehog after a6, d6. Yeah, after c takes d4, if white tries to play knight d6, which is seemingly the threat, then it's basically game over for white. Why? After knight d6, bishop d6, black continues d3, fe3, and now simply knight e4. And why did you give up a pawn? Where does your bishop go? For example, bishop to a3, we simply go f5, securing our knight. This is overwhelming for black, and black should be easily winning. So knight c4, the idea is actually not to go knight to d6. The idea is to provoke black into preventing knight to d6. So the most logical pattern people use to prevent jumps into d6 is to either play d6 or d5. d5 is the trap. d6 is fine, I should mention. After d6, dc5 and bc5, black is losing to knight d6. But if d takes, then queen d8 and king d8 and knight g5, and maybe black can survive. Although, yeah, now that I look at it, d6 is not okay. Black doesn't survive. So yeah, d6 is actually bad too. It's not immediately losing, but it's very bad. So if they do go d6, just go dc5. And on bc5, win a pawn. On dc5, exchange queens and play knight g5. Sorry about not preparing this. I just thought it was sort of okay, but it's not. But the most common way to fall for this trap is pawn to d5. After pawn to d5, white isn't winning, but he's very close to winning. We continue knight c to e5, and here is the point. We said that this trap is about this diagonal, pressure on d7, pressure on c6. but it's also about pressure on f7. And we can see, if you're familiar with the Karpov-Karo Khan, there is a line in which black loses his f7 pawn, allowing the knights to come to e5 and to g5. And this is very similar. There's really no easy way to prevent all of this. Black has to prevent two things: bishop b5 and knight g5. Okay, so if they go a6, preventing bishop to b5, we go knight g5. And I mean, maybe he doesn't resign immediately, but probably should. Okay, so what can black do? Black can play bishop to d6. So if knight g5, we simply take, but that didn't prevent pawn to a6. So now bishop to b5. And how do you save yourself? The only move is king to e7. Otherwise, you resign straight away. If you play knight b to d7, a simple win: knight takes d7, knight takes d7, and bishop to d6. We win the bishop. That's it. What else? I don't know what else. If you take on f4, then I take here with check, and again you resign. So that loses straight away. So after knight c5, a6 doesn't work, bishop d6 doesn't work, bishop e7 doesn't work. Again, we go bishop to b5, knight b d7. Now the bishop is not hanging, but we can go knight d7, and knight e5, and we win. Yeah, it's just a winning position. So this is so tricky that I would actually suggest you to try it out. If they go b6 and bishop b7, I would suggest knight c4, because as we saw, d6 loses, and d6 should be much worse for black, and d5 is even worse. Okay, these are the traps I wanted to show you. I hope you found them interesting. I hope you learned something new. Sorry about some details that I may have missed. And I always read most of the comments, and I'm aware of most things I miss, and I'm sorry about that. Hopefully you can understand. Anyway, let me know what you think about the video. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.